Hi, everyone. Hi, Rory. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm very excited today. This is Shambhavi, and I'll be talking about how to come up with the next needle moving feature for your product area. And specifically, I'll be starting with what are these needle moving features, and also why should you care about them. And then I will be talking about a 5-step framework that you can follow to nail down the next needle moving feature for your area. So, before we get into it, just a little bit about me. I am an engineer turned product manager turned entrepreneur. I have spent about 2 years in engineering and 10 years in product management in companies like Amazon, Groupon, and Home Depot. I have worked a lot in e commerce and within that, personalization and marketing. And then later, I also got into the B2B space. So, did some enterprise product management for Amazon business customers. Um, and Currently, I'm running my own startup called Mentor Me Good, where I help people to land their dream roles in big tech and other tech companies. Yeah, let's get into it. What are needle moving features? Why don't we look at some features and uh, maybe you can chat, write your responses on the chat box, and we'll see if some of them are needle moving or not. So, starting with the first one, this is Microsoft Bing. And here the use case is that the user wants to plan a Disneyland trip with a 5-year-old. So on the left hand side, you're looking at uh, an old experience where someone would go to the Microsoft Bing and just search for a Disneyland trip with 5-year-old, hoping to get like ton of blogs and personal experiences from people to see how they should go about it. But on the right hand side, you'll see the new chat feature from Microsoft Bing, where the user asks, instead of search, they ask, help me plan a Disneyland trip with a 5-year-old, and a bunch of more questions. And in the result, you'll see that they get a structured response to each of their questions. So, do you think this is a needle moving feature? I think this is, because this fundamentally changed how the user is going about their use case of planning a Disneyland trip. Let's look at one more. So, on the left hand side, you have the good old pressure cooker, a slow cooker. But on the right hand side, you have Instant Pot. For those of you who don't know, Instant Pot came in as a product in Amazon Marketplace without any big launch or uh, standalone launch, but it still was a hit because it fundamentally changed how people cook, and they built a community around it to share recipes. And this was certainly a needle moving feature. Let's look at one more. So here you'll see you have two landing pages. On the left hand side, you have one image. On the right hand side, the image is changed, but rest of the things are same. So is this a needle moving feature? Probably not. You may get a lot of incremental benefit from this if this website has a lot of features, sorry, a lot of users. Then even a small incremental impact on an individual basis can add to a big impact for the product, but this is not really a needle moving feature. So having looked all this, what are the attributes of needle moving features? So the first is it improves the outcome of users significantly on a per user basis. So as a user, your behavior can change, how you interact with the product can change, and it's not just a small change on the website. The second attribute is that these product features are often first in their market. So they might be a distinguishing feature, something that people have not seen before. And the third one is that these features have major impact in the product's trajectory overall, its growth, and it can also impact the other product features of that product. So, having looked at what needle moving features are, you must be thinking, why should you care? Now, like me, if you are into product management, you know that you have to juggle a ton of things as a product manager. You might not have to do everything that's on the slide, but you definitely do a lot of stakeholder management, coming up with roadmaps, looking at data, and so many things. But if I were to ask you, what is the main deliverable that you have? What would you say? Is it building roadmaps, or is it planning meetings, or is it doing the user design, working with the UX team, or what is it really? So I think as a product management manager, delivering business impact is the number one priority. You may ship a lot of features, uh, but someone who has shipped 10 features versus someone who has shipped one feature, do you think you can tell who is a better product management? Probably not, because it's always about delivering the business impact. And when you deliver a needle moving feature, you deliver on the business impact. So now that we know that why delivering needle moving features are important, let me share with you a 5-step framework that I think will help you have a structure to your thought process and come up with a needle moving feature for your product area. So the step one of this 5-step process is to understand your product's output metrics and actions that drive them. So I will be using an example throughout this framework, just so that you can resonate with it better. Um, so let's take an example of LinkedIn, and let's look at how do you think about the output metrics. But first, what are output metrics? Now, these are the metrics that you don't control directly, but they are the outcomes that you want. For a product, there could be many output metrics. It could be in revenue, it could also be monthly active users. Because when you come to think about it, you can't really do something to increase monthly active users directly. You launch features, you impact, you influence the input drivers that in turn impact the output metrics. So in this case, for LinkedIn, I have chosen subscription revenue and ad revenue as two output metrics, just for this example. Uh, and then within ad revenue, one of the things, again, output is the time spent on platform. Now, what are the actions that you want the user to take to drive these output metrics? So if you look at subscription revenue, you want the users, specifically job seekers, to find jobs, and the recruiters or hiring managers to find the leads. If they do that, people will subscribe to their LinkedIn Premium, and which in turn will drive revenue. The other option is to have courses so that the job seekers can upskill, and that would again then contribute to subscription revenue. If you look at ad revenue, the time spent on the platform, if you enable creators, it will definitely drive time spent on the platform and ad revenue. And if you the last one here is enable conversations between users, which is LinkedIn messaging. So if you help somehow or add features that will help users communicate with each other better and get the results that they want, the ad revenue will increase. So that's the first step, where you have to understand what are the output metrics of your product and what are the actions you want to drive to achieve those output metrics. The step two here is to connect those actions with the input metrics for your product area. So input metrics here are the metrics that you can directly influence. Whenever you launch a feature, you define a feature, you have input metric in your success criteria. So these are the actions from the previous slide. And let's say that your product area is LinkedIn messaging, and the action that you want to drive is healthy conversations between users. Now, think of the input metrics that are relevant to this. So, for example, one could be number of sends. If people send more messages, then that's good for your product area. The second could be reply rate. So, if users is sending messages to other people, how many percentage of those messages get a response back? So that's reply rate. And then there is conversation depth, which is measuring how many back and forth messages are exchanged on an average. And if you have this number more, it means that users are having meaningful conversations among themselves. So for the sake of example here, let's say you have data and you see that you have reasonable amount of number of sends, but your reply rate is really low. And that's where with the same action, you have selected reply rate as your goal metric. So this is step number 3, where you select a goal metric among the input metrics that you have, and then you have to build a hypothesis or multiple hypotheses that would drive the reply rate. So we moved from the output metrics to relevant actions, the input metrics, and we chose a goal metric. Now, with reply rate as a goal metric, you have to think about what are the hypotheses or what are the things that you can do to drive this. You start with asking yourself how to increase the reply rate of LinkedIn messages. You dive further into data and you find out why is the reply rate low. There could be multiple reasons. Maybe users are not seeing the messages, or maybe they see it but they don't reply because there is a lot of friction in replying. And it could be a combination of both. And by using data and the user feedback, you will understand which of them to prioritize, or you may come up with hypotheses that will help solve both the issues. So in this case, for example, one of the hypotheses that you can have is that if we send email reminders to users for unseen messages, then it will lead to high reply rates because of increased awareness, because probably people are just missing out on these notifications. So that sounds reasonable. There could be another hypothesis that if we give in-mail credits to users who reply to messages, then it will lead to high reply rates because of incentivization. So introducing a gamification element here. And one more hypothesis that we can throw in is that if we auto-suggest replies on messaging, then it would lead to high reply rates because of ease of use. So once you have the hypothesis laid down, you go to the next step. So that next step is step number 4, which is to prioritize the hypothesis to validate. So in this case, so usually when as product managers, we are prioritizing, simply put, we use 2 criteria. Generally, one is the estimated benefit, and the second is the effort that it will take to do it. Now, in this case, I recommend you also use a third criteria when you look at these hypotheses to see whether these hypotheses or features, they have a potential of being a needle moving feature or not. So, for example, if you look at our hypothesis from the previous slide, if we send email reminders to users for unseen messages, it may help us, but we may have data from our previous like emails, like click rate, open rate, and with all that data, we can see that maybe the estimated benefit is not that high. We can also work with our engineering team to figure out what is the effort. Similarly, we can do it for all these hypotheses. But when you are trying to evaluate whether the feature has the potential of being a needle moving feature, you go back to the attributes of a needle moving feature. So remember, in the beginning, we saw that it should have a high individual impact. So there should be a shift in how the user is interacting with the product. So hypothesis number one doesn't satisfy that criteria. Similarly, you should also look if this is the feature that is that we don't offer, or no one in our market is offering. And you should also look at whether it has a potential of changing how people in general interact with LinkedIn messaging and other LinkedIn products as a whole. So with these three criteria in mind, you should prioritize the hypothesis. And which brings me to the last step, which is launch the needle moving feature. Now, usually the first two steps are same how you would go about any other feature. So the first one being define the feature. Sure, you convert your hypothesis into a well-defined feature. Include the end-to-end customer journey, the mocks, the assumptions, and everything. And the second step is to have a launch plan, which we usually do when we launch something. So when you're launching something as an experiment, include the experiment details. What would be your success criteria? What is the dial-up schedule and rollback plan? The third point here is the difference where you need to track the attributes of needle moving features. When you launch this as an experiment, you should measure the impact per user, because that's the key of a needle moving feature. You should also see how does it impact the other product areas. So if for example, in LinkedIn messaging, if people are if you have a high reply rate with this feature, are people using more of other LinkedIn features because of this? So that uh, takes me to the end of the 5-step framework. This is a quick recap. The first step is to understand your product's output metrics and the actions that drive them. From the actions, you come to the input metrics. So connect the actions with the relevant input metrics. The third step is to select the goal metric out of all the input metrics and then come up with multiple hypotheses. You will also need to get into drill into data for this. Then the next step is to prioritize the hypothesis. Make sure that you are looking for those needle moving attributes when you prioritize, along with the estimated benefit and the effort. And then the last step is to launch the feature and measure the right like metrics to make sure that this indeed turned out to be a needle moving feature. So with that, I will come to questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Shambhavi. That was a really nice kind of structured way of going from zero to good features. I have a few questions, but if anybody has any questions out there, please do post them again on whichever platform you're watching on. So it could be on UXDX or YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever, and we'll collate those through. One thing that I was thinking of was the inputs to kind of your output metrics. So how did you track those, or what kind of tools or structures do you use so that people, because I can imagine this could almost be fairly static in this first step, that it's almost quite common which things impact your core metrics.
Yeah, so your question is about how to go from output metrics to input metrics.
Yeah, sorry, and what tools do you use kind of to track that?
Yeah, so I would say so. Firstly, to come up with the output metrics, you should know the business model really well, and then from output to input, the best way to go is to like track those actions, because it is hard to come, for example, from ad revenue to enabling conversations. But if you look at what are the actions that you need to increase the time spent on the LinkedIn website, and you think through it, you will come up with a lot of actions that a user should be taking. We want the user to take. So, like taking another example, like there is a popular use case of onboarding users. A lot of sites, they onboard users and they want to make sure onboarding is a really frictionless experience, but they still want to get the right like the number of details that they want. So if again, if you want to increase the signups, which would be the input, which would be the input metric, and you want to like grow your business, that would be the output metric. So the action that you want to take is that you want to make sure your sign up flow is really easy and like visually very intuitive. And so when you think about the action, then you can relate that, okay, if it is frictionless, then I would increase my signups. So it's really going from output to the action and then the input metric.
Great. And do you track these in like Excel or an opportunity solution tree, like a Miro board or something like that? Or how do you track these?
Yeah, I think this kind of activity is a good, like a collaborative effort. So any kind of whiteboarding tool would be great for it. Like if you are in person, then actual whiteboard would be good as well. But other than that, like I don't think like there is a specific tool that you have to go for it. It's more of a like a exercise, a collaboration where you get ideas from like different stakeholders, taking into consideration whatever you know about the product, because you will have some data about the users, the feedback. Yeah.
Great. And there's a question just came in from Gary on the kind of taking it to the hypothesis stage. Who do you get involved in that? Like, so which team members and how do you pull people in to try and get you from that, okay, this is our metric, to these are our ideas?
Yeah, I think the number one is your customer. So if you are a consumer company, you would have like a lot of data on where the customer is spending their time. You may also have a website feedback mechanism where they'll send you feedback. So that will help you identify that, okay, this is a real problem. And sometimes the customers give you their version of the solution, that, oh, I wish this was there. And if you see that bubbling up like from a lot of users, then then that will be a good hypothesis to have. If you are in a B2B space, you are talking with customers, sales, and customer success managers. I think those people are like of really great help when you are building your hypothesis. And I've often also seen, because it depends on how the team is structured, but if there is a UX team that kind of is a central team, they would know a lot of issues that you as a PM of a silo product doesn't know. So it will be good to involve them as well.
Excellent. And then there's the age-old prioritization. So I like the way you added in an extra step into the prioritization of, is it, I guess, the volume or the chance needle moving nature of
Yeah.
the item. How do you, because I've seen the kind of benefit cost factors being a bit challenging, because historically we're very poor at estimating how much of a benefit something has and how much of a cost. So what do you do to try improve your tactics of figuring out roughly how much do we think this can improve it and roughly how much will this cost?
Yeah. So definitely there is no one answer for all types of features. But going back to that example where you want to estimate what will be the impact of sending emails, right? So you are sending other types of emails. Maybe you are sending transactional emails or some other emails. So you know what is the engagement on that, and so you kind of use that number and try to estimate like how much this will be successful. It really depends on the feature, but you should always have some estimation instead of just being like blank. Uh, so um so estimated benefit, I feel, is definitely an important prioritization criteria. It just cannot go away. So benefit and the cost are important. And the reason I added a third one is because as a product manager, when you are building your roadmap, you want the roadmap to be balanced. It should not be that you are only doing KTLO features, or you are only doing those small incremental features or compliance features. You should have like think big or needle moving features in there as well, so that you have both short term and long term like value getting delivered. So thinking about this third dimension will help you make sure that the roadmap is balanced.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it makes sense, and I think it's a very good point. And then the final question that I have, but please do keep sending in your questions, is just around the execution step. So do you put any kind of iteration or kind of validation early on in there, or how do you spec out how you should go about delivering this?
Yeah, so if we talk about this example, where you're trying to introduce, let's say, auto replies. Now this would require a significant investment in a machine learning solution that would where you will use your data, and then it would automatically predict like different responses that the user can choose from. So you don't get into doing that huge investment right away. So there are ways that you can iterate on it by building something small. So for example, in this case, you can have a rule based system where, as LinkedIn, you know what are the popular question types that people are getting. So job seekers, a lot of time, they want to connect with people for a one-on-one chat to explore opportunities, or they want someone to review their resume. So there are these popular types of things, and a rule-based system which is a quick and less costly way to implement this solution. From that, you can easily understand if people are really responding positively to it, if it is indeed increasing the reply rate. And if that is happening, then you can invest in a full-fledged machine learning solution. So this was relevant for this example. But similarly, for any other thing, like if you have a way to test something on a smaller control group with a cheaper solution, like you should go for that first. And if you get evidence that, okay, this would work, then you can invest in a full solution.
Excellent. Well, that's a great approach to it. So I think that brings us actually to time, but thank you very much, Shambhavi, for sharing that process, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Rory. And I do cover the execution piece in a video. So if you want, I can share the link of that to you so that we can share it with the audience.
That'd be great. Thank you.